With Specner Strider set to return the rotation this week, what does that mean for the rest of the group? I'll answer that question and many more on today's mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Check out the podcast there at Locked On_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. If you listen on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. It is a mailbag episode. We're doing it late on a Friday night here, coming back from some work travel that I had earlier this week. So looking forward to getting into these questions today. A pretty good week for the Atlanta Braves. Won a series against the Phillies, but unfortunately dropped Friday night's game against the Rays. You want to hear more about that? Go listen to the postcast with Lindsay. I should be back on the postcast over the weekend. So looking forward to getting back into that with him. But as usual on the mailbag episode, I will answer a variety of questions, but several of them have to do with the starting rotation once Strider returns. Also, Michael Harris and his struggle. Is he capped until he learns some more plate discipline and just how good he can be? I'll answer all those questions on today's mailbag episode of the Locked On Braves. And let's jump right into the first question. This one coming from AAWX, who says, with Strider seemingly on the cusp of making his return, what roster move would you make to bring him back? And how does your rotation look with Strider? Is Holmes in it? Is Elder in it? So Elder's out, in my opinion. That might not line up completely, or I guess it would kind of line up with where Elder is pitching on Friday, because it looks like Strider could pitch either on Wednesday or Thursday of next week. So Elder is the odd man out for me right now. He just hasn't shown enough. And look, to be honest, I don't know that Grant Holmes has necessarily proven a lot either, but he at least kept the Phillies off the board for 4 innings the other night. But for me, I think it's Elder. You option him. You have the ability to option him back without losing him. So you option him down. You don't have that ability with a Grant Holmes. So you'd have to DFA if you were to option him, and you can't just move. I don't think moving one of those guys to the bullpen necessarily is the move either. Jose Suarez has actually done a fine job in that role. So, and that's the only spot that you would necessarily take. Obviously, Zach Thompson's in there right now with Aaron Bummer on the bereavement list, but he obviously should be back by the time Strider comes back, most likely. So I think it's Elder. He gets optioned back to AAA. Holmes and AJ Smith-Shawver stay in the rotation, and Spencer Strider is inserted in that trip in Toronto. That's how I would do it, and I think that's how the Braves will play it, bearing anything crazy that happens between now and then. And again, with Elder pitching on Friday, that pretty much aligns up with his next spot. You would just start Strider in place of him and send Elder back down. You kind of have that ability with him having the option. You can do it with AJ Smith-Shawver too, but I don't think anybody goes into the bullpen. I think it's either AJ Smith-Shawver or Bryce Elder gets sent back down. And again, I think it's most likely going to be Bryce Elder. And look, this is a bigger point that we can talk about, and it's kind of a side tangent from the question from AA here, is really none of them, whether it be Elder, Holmes, or AJ Smith-Shawver, has shown enough to me to think that any of them really deserve to stick in the rotation. But those are your options right now. And we have another question later that I think kind of speaks to that. But I do think Elder is the odd man out just based on the way the rotation is lined up at the moment. E. Goldie says, Ozzy's bat looks slow through the zone. His swing is long. Do you think any of that would change if he swung a bat more like Ronald's? That's a hard question to answer because it's a completely different swing depending on which side of the plate you're talking about. It is not the same swing at all. I don't know how many people can actually have Ronald Acuna Jr.'s type of swing because you just have to have some really quick bat speed. And you're right about Ozzy looking on Baseball Savant. He has the 6th percentile in bat speed, which is obviously super slow. And look at what it was last year. He was a 14th percentile. So it is somebody with just a really slow bat. I wouldn't mind because of that if he started with his hands back a little bit more, so he can be quicker to the zone. But again, it's hard as a switch hitter because it is two completely different swings for him. And you're talking about a guy in Ron Acuna Jr. who is just not many people can do what he does. He was 99th percentile in bat speed. So you're talking about it's one thing to just generate bat speed. And yes, you can improve that. Certainly, you can make strides to improve that bat speed, but it's also hand positioning, timing. Ronald keeps those hands, he keeps his hands straight out in front of him, but it is quick back and forward that he has. Whereas Ozzy's, as you mentioned, is a little bit more loopy. It's a little bit longer, especially from that left side. So, I mean, it certainly wouldn't hurt, I don't think, but I think it's easy to say, okay, just swing like Ronald does, but not everybody can swing like Ronald does. Matt says, will Ozzy and Harris ever show plate discipline, or should we just accept who they are? I don't feel any hitting coach can get through to them. Like, Michael Harris is 24. I hate to say that he can't make the adjustments. For Ozzy, I think he has made some adjustments in being a little bit more patient. He drew a walk on Friday night. So I think he has made some strides in that area. They are just two guys that are going to chase out of the zone a ton. And at least to this point, again, I hate to say, especially for a Michael Harris, that he can't change when he's only 24 years old, but that is just their profile. And, for now, I think we do just have to accept it as who they are. They are aggressive swingers. They're not going to walk a lot, and they are going to chase out of the zone a ton. And I think that's just who they are, for better or worse. Now, with those approaches, they have had really good seasons before. So it's not like they can't have good seasons with that type of approach, but it does lead to some very frustrating at bats. The chosen one, is it a possibility that we trade Baldwin for a really good reliever and bring back Trump? No. Once Grant McCauley told me in the postseason how the Braves weren't willing to trade or even to think of the idea of moving Drake Baldwin in a deal for Garrett Crochet, that tells me he's untouchable, because Garrett Crochet was my number one target in the offseason that I wanted the Braves to go get. I would have been willing to move a Drake Baldwin in a deal for Garrett Crochet. That just speaks more to how good I think Crochet can be, and not necessarily a knock on Drake Baldwin. But, knowing that the Braves were unwilling to move Drake Baldwin in that type of deal, I think he's pretty much untouchable at this point. So, and I think he's too valuable to trade for just a good reliever as well. So I wouldn't do that type of moves. But no, I don't think the Braves would do that. I don't think they're trading Drake Baldwin at this point. Matt says, our starters other than Schwelly need to be able to pitch more than 4 innings. Our bullpen seems to be rounding into form, but will be toast if they have to pitch 4 or 5 innings nightly. Unfortunately, I have no confidence in Elder and a bandbox tonight giving us a link. So, obviously they've already played the Friday night game, and Elder was what I guess you would kind of expect in a bandbox like that. Unfortunately, the Braves offense didn't take advantage of that, but Elder at least did give you 6 innings in this one. Was 6 innings, 5 earned, but he at least gave you some length. But you're spot on, and this is kind of where I was going earlier when we were talking about the rotation and what it looks like with Strider and whether or not Elder or AJ Smith-Shawver or Holmes. And when I said none of those 3 have really proven to me they deserve to stay in the rotation, but those are your options right now. And it's because, and I said this on the postcast, I've said it on other podcasts I've done, and it's exactly what you're saying here, Matt. You can't continue to have 3 guys in your rotation that when they start, you have little to no confidence that they're going to get you through 5 innings, because it is going to absolutely kill your bullpen. So these guys are going to have to step up, because it is what it is. Those are your best options right now. And you're not going to be able to find many other better options at this point in the season. There's really not going to be many people available through trade. These are your options, and they're going to have to step up, because you're absolutely right. It is. And I know early in the season in April, you're not going to push guys beyond 90 pitches, certainly not on to 100. But even a guy like Chris Sale, we need him consistently going 6 innings, and he hasn't been able to do that yet. There is a question about Chris Sale coming up next that we will talk about with his dip in velocity. How concerned should we be about that? I'll answer that question here next. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades at supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy to use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. Thank you as always, making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. When you get a podcast from Sully every day, you also get the MLB Game Night, which Lindsay is a part of, recapping all of the games from each and every day. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On MLB and give them their second listen after you're done here. Well, let's jump back into our questions. And I hinted the next one we were going to talk about has to do with Chris Sale. Big Dog Fan 73 says, how concerned should we be with the dip in velocity by Sale, especially given his usage last year and his propensity for injuries in the past? The velocity dip that we saw the other night, I'm not as concerned about because it was a really cold night, and I think you can certainly chalk it up to that. But the velocity is down a good bit overall this season, sitting at 93.2 miles per hour on the year where it was 94.9. So you're talking about a pretty big dip from one year to the next. Now, certainly it helps when he's able to pump in 96, 97 when he has to. I still think Chris Sale can be a good pitcher, maybe not an NL Triple Crown winner if the velocity doesn't come back, but his bread and butter is that slider. And right now, you look at the slider, it has a 179 XBA. Last year, it was a 175. The whiff rate is down a good bit. The whiff rate last year was 42.7. This year, it's 35.4, but that's still a really good whiff rate. The X slug on it right now is 312. Last year, it was 245. So that pitch is still doing really well. But, to your point on the fastball, it's an XBA of 412 on his four-seamer this year. Last year, that was 235. He actually has a higher whiff rate on the fastball this year, but we're also still dealing with some early season sample size. I say for now, I put it in about a medium concern territory. We get through the month of May, things start to warm up, guys start to shake off some of that rust. If we continue to see that fastball sit 92, 93, then I'm be a little bit more concerned about Chris Sale being close to the guy that we saw last year. Again, with that slider, with that arm angle, I think he's still going to be a really good pitcher. But if the velocity doesn't come back, obviously he's not going to be nearly as dominant. But the slider has still been a dominant pitch for him. It's really just that fastball velocity that is hurting him at the moment, and the fastball in general, like I said, with that high expected batting average that he has against it. I think the changeup's still been a really good pitch for him. It has a 236 XBA. It was 210 last year, a 23.1% whiff rate, 23.6% last year. So again, the changeup's pretty much been the same. The slider, at least batting average wise, has pretty much been the same. The whiff rate is down a little bit on the slider. It's really just that four-seamer, and that's probably the one thing that you can really correlate straight to velocity. So again, if that velocity doesn't come back, I think there is some concern for Chris Sale, at least not being the type of pitcher that he was last year. Justin Shoemake says, with Renato Lopez out for at least 3 months or longer and Atlanta starting pitching depth not good at all, do they trade for or sign someone, or do they just try one of their young prospects and hope for the best? Isn't that what they're doing with AJ Smith-Shawver right now? I mean, I think that is the young prospect they're hoping for the best. They know the stuff is good, and they're hoping it just all comes together at the big league level, which doesn't normally happen. I know it happened last year with Spencer Schwellenbach. That is not normal, especially for a kid who's still just 22. I mean, Schwellenbach's older than he is. So I feel like they've already done that with an AJ Smith-Shawver, and I don't know who you do that with next, unless it is a Hurston Waldrop. I don't really know who that next young prospect is that they would push up. I don't know that Lucas Braun is quite ready for that opportunity yet. So again, I think they're already at that point. You're not signing anybody at this point that's going to come in and all of a sudden be a part of your rotation like that. Nobody's really going to trade anyone of significance at this point in the season. Anybody that you're going to trade for is going to be just as good or bad, or whatever your point of view is, as a Grant Holmes or a Bryce Elder. You're not getting anybody of significance at this point of the season. So they're going to have to find a way to make it work. Now, they are getting Strider back, and that's going to help add some length to the rotation, certainly. But there are, even when he comes back, there's going to be 2 spots in this rotation that you're really not comfortable with. And as we just talked about with Chris Sale and his velocity being down, you're not exactly sure what you're getting from him at the moment either. He's barely getting you through 5 innings, or not even on some nights. So there are certainly some concerns in the rotation, but this is the result of not doing anything more in the offseason and really just going into the season and hoping that these guys stay healthy and hoping that AJ Smith-Shawver figures it out at the big league level. So that is directly on the front office. Chris Mofield, keep wanting for Harris to take the next step and be an all-star type player, starting to doubt he will, concerned. I'll be honest, and I'm usually pretty slow with the throwing out the warning signs or anything like that. Michael Harris is maybe the most concerning of the hitters so far this year, just because the swing decisions are still really bad. And it's not that he can be good without that, but in order for him to be good, he has to hit 300. Because if you're going to walk 4% of the time and you're going to continue to swing at pitches outside of the zone like he has, you got to bat 300 like he did in his first 2 years. So he is capping what his ceiling can be and what we all think he can be because of those chases out of the zone. He's in the first percentile in chase percentage, a 46.5% chase rate, a 2.1% walk rate. That's 6th percentile in all of baseball. He is capping what he can be as a player with these poor swing decisions. And look, again, he can be good without that. He's shown it before, even with this profile. But I think a lot of us, like myself, thought if he can improve on that and have some better plate discipline and stop chasing so much, that there is another level for Michael Harris. But I certainly agree with you. And it's why he's maybe concerning me the most, is because he gets to 2 strikes. You bounce the ball up there and he is swinging at it. It is just some really bad plate discipline and really bad swing decisions. And you would hope in year 4 now that you would see some progression in that area. And if you haven't, if anything, it's gone backwards. It's gotten worse. And again, we're dealing with small sample size in this season, but we're not dealing with small sample size in what we've seen from Michael Harris over 4 years now. It's not great play discipline. You know he's not going to walk, which means he has to make a lot of contact, which means he needs to make contact in the zone because he has to bat 300 in order for him to be a good player, because he's not getting on base through walks. So if he's not getting on base through his hits, it's a really low value. I shouldn't say low value, but it's certainly not as valuable as he can be. And that's certainly a concern right now. I know, again, it's small sample size early, but he's hitting 208 with a 216 on base. And that's because he's not walking. And so in order for him to have a 330 on base like he did the first 2 years, he has to hit 290 like he did the first 2 years. And he didn't do it last year with a 264 average with a 304 on base. And again, very early on right now, he's not there either with a 208 average and a 216 on base. So until we see him be able to lay off those pitches, until we see him stop chasing so much, it does limit the potential ceiling for Michael Harris. PJ's Braves, knowing you are a Schwellenbach fan, and rightly so, what do you see in him that is enabling him to have such an impact given his relative lack of experience, especially against playoff caliber teams like the Phillies? So he's faced the Phillies 4 times now, and it's pretty much been domination all 4 times. And that's why I said at the end of last year, I was highly confident in Schwellenbach going into this year and beyond, is because you face a lineup like the Phillies 3 times in your rookie season, and they don't figure you out by that 3rd time. And same thing with the Mets. There's something special about you. And we're seeing that so far early on this season. Now, what makes him so special? It's composure. on the mound. That's big. You have to have it between the ears to succeed as early on as he did. And obviously the stuff. I mean, you got a 5-6 pitch mix, and it's not just that, but being able to command it. And now the velo on the fastball is up a little bit, and it's just making him even more dangerous. So when you have that many pitches with that much movement that you can command, that's what makes him so dangerous, and what is so makes him so impactful, that it doesn't matter if you're a Phillies. He can attack you a different way each time. He doesn't have to attack Bryce Harper the same way every time he goes up there. So if you're going to work on that, throw him that splitter this first time up, then next time you may pound him in with a fastball. And so he can do different things in each at bat. So it's not the same thing every time, because he has so many pitches and he could command all of them. So the hitter really has to stay on guard, and they don't know what's coming each and every time. And you can only do that if you can command all of those pitches. And he has the ability to command all of them. And that's just really a special talent. Caden Hurd says, do you see a big pitching trade in our future? And if so, who would you like? Love and hate for the trade. Example, I would like Cease, love Sandy Alcantara, and hate Martin Perez. So I apologize, Caden. Just got in off my flight recording this, so I didn't have a lot of time to prep this beforehand. So I really haven't given much thought into it and looked into it. I don't think the Marlins are going to trade Sandy Alcantara within the division like that. I know they traded Jesus Luzardo to the Phillies in division, but I just don't see that happening. I don't know what the Braves would give up in that. I think the Padres are going to hold on to Dylan Cease. We'll see if all of a sudden they take on a bunch of injuries and start to fall. They're a team that when healthy, like we saw an opening day weekend, I think they're a very dangerous team, but they're an injury or two away from, I could see things really falling apart for them, and maybe they are sellers at the deadline. But I would like a Dylan Cease or Michael King, just like I said in the offseason. I'd probably lean Michael King of those two. That'd probably be somebody that I love, but I haven't really put much thought into who else out there. I'd put Eric Fetty from the Cardinals in probably that, not in that hate category, but just that okay category, I guess. I can't think of anybody that I would absolutely hate. As much as how about this? How much as I've talked about the Braves signing Jose Quintana, if the Braves traded for Jose Quintana, again, I don't necessarily know that I would hate that, but it wouldn't really inspire me too much, even though as much as I wanted him during the offseason just for depth. But again, giving up something like that for a Jose Quintana, giving up an asset instead of just giving up $4 million like they should have done, I would hate that type of move. But we'll see once we get closer to the deadline, obviously, who is out there and who's available. But it's just really too early to even think much about that. If the Mariners were to fall out of it, obviously they have a lot of interesting arms that would make sense in some trades. So that's a team to keep an eye on. All right, several more questions to get to on today's mailbag episode. We'll wrap things up here and answer the rest of those next. All right, so just a couple of more questions here before we wrap things up. Jason Hensley says, as Verdugo is about ready to be called up, what roster spot would you move to make room for him? Cut De La Cruz or option Kelenic? So you can option either of those guys. Right now, at least in that Phillies series, both of them had some really good at-bats, especially Jared Kelenic. You would have asked this before the Phillies series, I would have said it's a no-brainer. You send down Jared Kelenic and to bring up Alex Verdugo, but he had some really good at-bats in that Phillies series. Some really key at-bats in that series, I thought. And so I don't know at this point. And De La Cruz has been hitting the ball really hard. So I don't know of those two who you send down right now. Stuart Fairchild is out of options. So if you cut him, you're going to have to DFA him and potentially lose him. But De La Cruz and Kelenic have been swinging the bat pretty well at the moment. So I think it all just depends on when Verdugo's ready, which of them makes the most sense. Would you rather have two lefties or two righties? Right now the Braves are carrying two righties in Fairchild and De La Cruz and the one lefty in Kelenic. But do you go with two lefties? Do you keep Kelenic and Verdugo both on the rosters? You're primarily going to face right-handed pitchers. So you could go with an outfield of Kelenic, Verdugo, and Michael Harris, be an all-lefty outfield, and kind of just stack the lineup with lefties and have De La Cruz off the bench late in the game if a lefty reliever comes in. I could see them certainly going that route. You just give up on Fairchild at that point, which I don't know that they quite want to do. But that might be the way that I'm leaning right now at the moment, because Fairchild's not getting those opportunities. De La Cruz has held his own against righties too, though. He's had some really good at bats lately, and he has some of that pop in the order. But I think those are probably the best three players: De La Cruz, Kelenic, and Verdugo. Especially if Kelenic keeps up what we've seen here lately, the type of at bats that he's had. But I do think if Kelnic's not going to play every day, option him to AAA so that he can get those everyday at bats, because we're already seeing a little bit of progress from him in the early going. I mean, the first couple of weeks or first week or so, he looked completely lost at the plate. And now you're seeing some progress from him, some very patient about what I love about, and I'm trying to make this a Jared Kelenic episode here, but what I've loved about him lately is that, he'll take his shot early in a count. He feels like if he's going to get a pitch early, he's taking his swing and he might fall behind 1-2, 0-2, but then he's battling. You saw that in that Phillies series, and several of those at bats where he walked, he fell behind early in those at bats, but then he was able to take some really close pitches, foul off some close pitches, get back into the bat and earn a walk, or at the very least, make the pitcher work a little bit. Instead of these at bats that we've seen from him, and honestly, a lot of other Braves players, where you go up there and you take your hack at a pitch, and then you're down 0-2, and then you're gone in 3-4 pitches, and you're not really making the pitcher work at all. It's okay to be aggressive, and now I'm speaking largely to the entire lineup. It's okay to be aggressive early. If you think you can sit on a pitch early that you're going to be aggressive and go after it. What this team doesn't do a lot of, though, is after they do that, okay, then battle back in the account. Okay, shorten up with 2 strikes a little bit and maybe punch one the other way. And I know a lot of Freddie Freeman lovers are probably going to love hearing me say this, but that's what Freddie Freeman did and makes him so special. Freddie Freeman was an aggressive hitter. He would go up there and try to ambush a pitch early in at bat, but then you would see him get into his at bat. He would battle. He would then look to push one over the shortstop's head, and you don't see that up and down from this Braves lineup. They go up aggressive and they stay aggressive, and it makes for some really quick at bats, either some 1-pitch rollovers or it's a 2, 3, 4-pitch strikeout. And so sees Kelenic having signs of doing that. I hope the rest of the lineup does as well. Dustin Mounts, what are your thoughts on the Braves starting to play some small ball? There have been some critics and praise for it, even though they need to improve bunting skills some. So I might disagree with my postcast partner a little bit here. I know he's completely against the bunt. I am not, but it has to be the right time. Runner on second, no outs. If Nick Allen's at the plate, he needs to be laying down a bunt. Even Michael Harris, who's been doing it here lately, especially if he's struggling at the plate like he is, lay down a bunt. Especially guys with speed, because you can lay down a bunt and put pressure on the defense. You get a good bunt, you may just reach. You may cause the defense to throw it away. There are other good things that can happen. But I'm all for a little bit more small ball. Even in Friday's game, on a 3-2 pitch with Ozuna at the plate, you had Michael Harris take off, and Ozuna smokes a baseball. It just unfortunately goes right at the shortstop. But I like seeing stuff like that, putting runners on the move. If you feel confident about a hitter, making contact, or even in that situation, Todd Bradley had picked off at least once, I think, in that at bat. So you felt pretty comfortable about going there. It feels like every team is stealing bases. I have more so than the bunts. I have more so emphasized the stolen bases is where the Braves are lacking. It feels like everybody's running on us. Christopher Morel was stealing a base on us, and terrible throw by Drake Baldwin in the center field. Why can we not do that? Why are we so bad at stealing bases? So look, I'm all for bunts in certain spots, in certain situations. Certainly I don't want Riley or Olsen or Ozuna or anybody like that laying down a bunt. Probably not even a Brian De La Cruz, but pretty much everybody else in this lineup needs to be prepared to drop down a bunt every now and then, especially when this lineup is struggling as much as it has been, to try to manufacture some runs and score in different ways. But again, my emphasis on small ball is more about stealing bases, putting on some hit and runs and things like that to try to push the issue and be more aggressive. But I'm certainly okay with laying down a sacrifice bunt every now and then too. Calvin Finner says, within a world where Murphy is healthy and is his old self and Baldwin ready, how confident are you to let Ozuna walk after this year so they can occupy the DH spot? I'm confident in that. That those two can handle if especially if Murphy is swinging the bat well and Baldwin, makes the strides offensively and defensively as well. I'm perfectly fine with that scenario. It's a way you could save some money if the Braves are going to go out and spend money in the offseason. But if Ozuna just comes back and nobody else really wants to give him, that bag because of maybe his past off-field stuff, whatever the case may be, which, understand. And he comes back and he's like, hey, I'll come back for 14, 15 million. I think you have to. He's been that good of a hitter. He's been that good in the clubhouse, honestly. I think you have to, just because he's been one of the best hitters in baseball for the past 2 years now. And if he's willing to take a discount or come in at a discount, I think you have to do that. But if not, I am fine with Ozuna walking away and having the DH spot be more of a revolving door, whether that is for more at bats for Baldwin and Murphy, whether it is an opportunity for Ronald to get more opportunities in the DH spot. I think it makes sense going forward whenever this Ozuna era is done to have a more fluid DH spot. Look, DH is like an Ozuna, like an Ohtani, maybe a Kyle Schwarber too. I think those are rare. And I think most teams would tell you that it's actually a little bit more beneficial to have that DH spot be a little bit more fluid, where you can give Matt Olson a day in the DH spot to give him off his feet if he still wants to play every day, to get Ronald Acuna out of the outfield. If it weren't for Marcell Ozuna, Acuna would be back right now, in my opinion, because you could just put him in the DH spot. But because that DH spot is so locked down by Ozuna and you can't put him anywhere else, it kind of limits what you can do otherwise. Last question, this one from Chop Life 31. The Braves seem to run out a different lineup every night. After seeing how productive Schwarber is at the top of the Phillies lineup, is it worth putting Ozuna at the top? Don't use the excuse of righty-lefty. Ozuna's OPS was better versus righties last year. What is your lineup? This is not something that I have thought about. And it's not a terrible idea with the way things are now. I've made it known that I don't think Michael Harris and Ozzie Albies are great top of the lineup guys, just because of their plate discipline. I think it's okay. I mean, generally, old school mentality, you put your faster players at the top of the order and your big hitters behind them to drive them in. I mean, that's generally how you do a lineup. But, in today's game, we've seen teams go away from that. We saw the Braves do it when they won a World Series. They put Jorge Soler in the leadoff spot for similar reasons, because he can lead off the game with a home run. He can take his walk. Now, comparing Schwarber to Ozuna, Schwarber's career walk rate is like 14, 15%. Ozuna's is more like 9, 10%. So I know Ozuna's walk rate right now is just ridiculously high. I don't know that keeps up forever, but it's not necessarily the same. What makes Schwarber so special is that he does have a 14, 15% walk rate, and he's going to hit 40 to 50 home runs. Ozuna can certainly hit 35, 40 home runs, and, probably with the pace that he's on, he's going to have over a 10% walk rate, but it's not necessarily the same. But I think Ozuna can also hit for a higher average than Kyle Schwarber. So it's not the worst of ideas, especially with the way the lineup is now without Acuna, without Profar, to have those big on-base guys at the top. It does just, like I've talked about a lot, that lack of athleticism in the lineup. Then all of a sudden you're stuck at the top with Ozuna, Riley, Olson. It's some station-to-station base running if you're not getting those extra base hits. You're not getting those doubles and those home runs from those guys. But, it's not a bad idea, and maybe something that Snitker should consider if Michael Harris and Ozzie Albies, can't get it done at the top of the order, at least until Acuna comes back. Maybe think about putting the Big Bear in the leadoff spot and just let them continue to walk him and hope that Riley and Olson and others can drive him in. All right, great list of questions as always. Thank you so much for submitting those in. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. If you're new, hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Follow us on the socials. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.